year's over, Muggle.
It is. 2023 is coming to a close. Before we get into 2024, we're doing our top 10 lists, and this time we're going over our top 10 books.
Books!
So, and I will go first this time.
Oh,
first the other two.
Look at you.
My number 10, we have, this year a couple other things, but I mostly read biographies and like media tie-ins. Those are like, I don't know, the two things this year that I mostly read. So we have number 10, we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Queen of the Slayers. It takes place after the end of the series, and Buffy is now being challenged because there is a rival who's calling herself Queen of the Slayers, who's taking a lot of the awakened potentials away from her, and it's like a rival dynamic. And this was again a fun tie-in to the end of the series.
My number 10 we do not have currently because your mother has it.
Okay, yeah.
So Stefan will play a picture.
Yeah, my mother's borrowing it to read.
Yep. It's called Making It So. It's the Patrick Stewart memoir.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize you were going to pre-order this.
Yeah.
Because I would have just found it eventually, because he's too old. I have this very specific, you can be a certain age to write a memoir. You can't be too young because you didn't do anything yet. Calm down. And you can't be too old because you're too old.
We start forgetting everything.
And this book was a lot of just, I talked to this person and they said this. And during this year, I did this play with this person, and this is a story that happened that they told me because I forgot. And it just makes me sad because it's too late. And a lot of it was just name dropping random people that I don't know. And I feel like it wasn't his voice as much because it was just stories he was relaying that he was told. And it just, I don't know. Not a fan. Yeah. But still decent and interesting.
Decent enough to be your number 10. My number 9 is the other Buffy one I read this year. It could because they kind of go together. They tie in Dark Congress.
Oh, do they tie in?
Well, they both are immediately after the end of the series before we get into anything else. And this one is more about all of the different quote-unquote evil, non-human creatures got together a long time ago in a congress to sort of nail things down and kind of make some rules of the game for each other. And just to make things more manageable and less chaotic. And the meeting is happening again, and Buffy is chosen as one of the representatives.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
And it's an interesting concept.
Kind of weird,
it really works. And then there's of course some conflict involved with some people that are faking the fact they're heroes. That it ends up working really well together. But to me, I kind of read them together as sort of like a right after the series.
No, Buffy towards the end was not. It was not its strongest towards the end.
No,
it just wasn't. Isn't Angel?
I like Buffy.
That time
I like Buffy a lot more.
Angel, but no, not my thing. Something that was kind of my thing. It's A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. This was a Book of the Month edition that I found on Pango, and it looked really good. I read some reviews, and everyone was like, "The twist is shocking." It was not shocking. It's kind of a weird thriller. It's supposed to be psychological, kind of like The Village, which I enjoy The Village. I'm the only person that enjoys The Village, but I don't know. It was a hippie commune thing, kind of supernatural-ish. There's all kinds of stuff happening, and it kind of fell flat for me. Halfway through, it's very slow. And it was enjoyable, but not something I would read again.
My number 8, I liked, but was also disappointed in. We had the latest of the Firefly books, Coup de Grace, which, again, it felt like a decent episode of the show, another story, and I'm really happy to get another one, but it's easily the weakest of these books that have come out for me. It was
by far
enjoyable, but the other ones I enjoyed much more. This one was a little more forgettable.
Yes.
So that's about all I'll have to say, because I know eventually you'll get to it as well.
Yes. But first, we're going to do the last book series that I read. I read a lot of duologies this year.
The one you just finished up.
This is a young adult series. Just preface that by saying it's young adult. And when you read young adult, you do have to go in with the mentality that this is not written for an adult.
Yeah.
And just kind of picture,
dumb down a bit.
If I was a teenage girl, I was once.
Yeah.
How would I feel about this? This is Winter Song by S.J. Jones, and I don't want to talk about this, but it's supposed to be like labyrinth fairy tale, but darker, and it kind of is. My biggest problem is that I don't like the leading lady, which is kind of a problem
when you're reading,
reading it.
Yeah.
It's very strange. The first one is decent, pretty decent. It's kind of incestuous though, and I don't think she meant to be. The way she describes the brother, like it's very inappropriate. But whatever, it's fine. It was good. This one is just like, this makes me really angry.
Yeah, you did not seem to like the way that turned out.
It's irresponsible. As an author,
I did not read these, so I don't know.
As an author, it's you need to keep in mind that who your audience is and what you're telling them, and they are teenage girls. And she spends both of these books talking about how she, like the main character, who's very like Stephanie Meyer's, like, this is my idealized version of myself.
Oh, yeah,
it's very much that, and you very obviously know that. But
yeah.
She spends so long saying how ugly she is. The first book is more just like her sister's prettier, she's very plain. This one's like, she's ugly. Like, she's just ugly, and nobody likes her. And it goes to like an irresponsible level.
Ugly and nobody likes me.
But it goes to like the Goblin King in this one, which I like the Goblin King. He like teaches her like, you are beautiful. There's a message. This one, the Goblin King literally is watching her come towards him and like, oh man, she's ugly, but I'll take it. But like, it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible. It just makes me angry. But a decent book. The first one, we'll forget about the second one. Very predictable, but.
Borrow from your pile. My number
pile.
7, again, is another duology that you read and then had me read this year.
A young adult series.
And weirdly, which I very rarely touch, and that was the reason this isn't higher, because in general, the girl from the well and the suffering, how would you describe the story in general for those with
well, because you know more about mythology in that part of the world.
Which is why I like the suffering a lot more, but basically it's
kind of like The Ring.
Yeah, like a
Exorcist.
teenager's bonded in connection to a kind of the girl from The Ring. That's, without spoiling anything, is the way I would describe it.
Mythologically speaking, she is like,
which is why, like, this is why this is even on. Like, this was okay, but I
think that was a decent.
But this was good. But the thing that held
that's her first novel too.
Yes, this was decent. This was on the verge of being great. I liked it, but the thing that held it back, both of them, again, was the fact that they were written for a young adult audience, and if these were written with a more adult perspective and level of narrative complexity, like in the process of like creating it, if that was the target audience, these would be much better.
Yes.
But even staying in the mindset of that's a teenager reading those, I thought they were really enjoyable.
They absolutely are.
I thought these were really good. This one in particular I thought was fantastic, to the point where I wish it was written with someone, for an older target audience.
I think it also
really
would have been better as like a mini-series or movie. Like, I think
it
that
did
second
have
one
a lot
had a
of that.
very like.
It had the feeling of kind of like a Netflix-y series.
Yeah,
but
like I could see that, like
good.
a two-parter or three-parter.
But,
my number 7 is just something that makes me happy. It's Dragon Princess from S. Andrew Swan. It's like 2014, 2015 it came out.
Okay.
But it just feels like a 90s, like, feel good. Like, this is just really funny. It's this nice man here. He's a thief. He's a thief and a shyster, and he pisses people off. And he ends up taking this mission to save a princess from a dragon, and it goes awry. There's magic, and he ends up body swapping with the princess. But then the princess ends up inside the dragon's body. It's a whole thing. It's very funny.
Kind of a fun summer read type.
Yeah, it's not.
Story.
There's nothing amazing, life-changing, fantastic about it, but it's really enjoyable. And sometimes, like, you just need like a quick, enjoyable, mass market paperback book.
Yeah.
And this is that for me. It checks all of those boxes.
My number 6, Star Trek TOS novel, we have Yesterday's Sun. I talked about this on the Trek a Day channel, but a story that ties into multiple TOS episodes and a time travel story. And
time travel? Leave that on the shelf.
And Spock's son, like, it gets into a lot of really cool things, and I love the way when these novels, I like when they're standalone, but also tie into things within the show.
It gives it more background.
Yeah, exactly. So this was a really
that actually did seem like an interesting.
This one you might check out.
TOS is kind of hit or miss for me.
I like that one.
I know you did. My number 6 is also Rin Chupeko's Girl in the Well and the Suffering. So brilliantly done. I've read her, she has a trilogy called the Bone Witch Trilogy, which I read first a couple years ago now. And it was really good. Again, young adult. It's such a weird thing, young adult books, because the genre did not exist for us.
Yeah, it wasn't really.
It wasn't a thing.
But I think
it was very difficult to find, and now
reading level of adults.
It's very difficult, especially with the fantasy genre. I feel like it's very difficult to even know because they don't always advertise what they are, and you're halfway through reading something and you're like, what is this? You have to read all the reviews explaining this is for young adults.
I think the other reason why you end up reading more young adult now is because, well, time-wise, a lot of the adult fantasy, it's like 8 500-page books.
Yeah, it's
versus
more epic
the young
fantasy.
adult, it's like, oh, I could read both of them in a weekend. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that's why you've been reading all more.
And it is harder to know all the time.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this. The problems I have with it, like you said, are because it's young adult.
For the audience,
It's really well done.
Not problems in quality,
No.
but we're not the target audience.
We are not the target audience, but I would have loved this. I would have loved to have that genre.
Yeah, these were like Scholastic, and we were 12.
Brilliant. The fantastic, and they're creepy, and they're great, and the characters are great, and I think for this being her first book, that's awesome. I'm really in love with her.
My number 5, Star Trek Enterprise, The Good That Men Do. This is a great stepping stone into the Enterprise books that cover what would have been a season like 5, 6, and 7, because this shows how that horrible last episode of Star Trek Enterprise was.
Oh, you mean that nice?
This retcons it. This shows
that nice speech with Riker.
It's all about how the historical, because Riker is viewing a historical record, and this is all about how that historical record has been compromised. It's false, and it's not exactly what happened. And this shows what really happened.
Lower Decks, he talks about that.
Yeah. But this is great, and I love how the narrative device that's used, sort of the bookend through the whole thing, is an older Nog and Jake Sisko are the ones exploring and uncovering that story.
Yeah.
So it's really good, and this is again just a great way of getting bridging Enterprise, the end of the series, into the novels that cover the Romulan War and the founding of the Federation. So really good book.
Also on Pango, I found a new author this year. I was really excited. I found 2 books of his, and I thought, I'm going to give these a try, but I'm going to like this one better. And that is T.J. Klune's House in the Cerulean Sea. I really thought this was going to be my favorite of the 2, and it's a bestseller, and it should be. He's like probably one of the best character writers that I've ever read.
For young adult level.
I don't know if this is young adult. I don't think it's really young adult. But it's, even for adult, like the level of like rawness and realness to his characters, and the book you read of his is very different.
Yeah, because they're a different one.
This one's kind of on the cusp of like, you could call it young adult, but I don't really think it is. This is very, like kind of even X-Men, like Miss Peregrine School for Extraordinary Children. It's that orphanage with like weirdos and like freaks, and the main character is like an auditor basically, and he goes, and one of the children is a little boy named Lucy who's an Antichrist. He's the Antichrist. It's great, and it's just it's such a simple story that's been done so many times, but he does it better, and it's just because it's so realistic, you feel all of the emotions. Like, it's just because it's written so well. And I really enjoyed it. And you should read T.J. Klune. You should too, but you won't.
Probably not. Moving on to, what number are we at to? My number 4 is actually a trilogy, the Star Trek Prey trilogy, one that you got for me. You got me this trilogy.
I'm excited you like that one.
It's really good, and it's a great trilogy. I really love the cover art.
Yeah, I love the cover art on it.
They're super good, and this is one of the post-Nemesis continuation Typhon Pact era things I had not tackled before, and talks a lot about the state of the Klingon Empire in that era, post-Dominion War, and how things are going, and it gets a lot into that and connects to a story that started in TOS with the fall of a house within the Klingon Empire and a secret fleet that they're building and them living in exile. And it ties together with a story that involves really the Enterprise with Spock a lot. And of course,
It involves Spock?
Yeah.
Really?
And then,
wow.
And then continue, that's sort of the beginning of where the narrative begins with the history of this house, and then continues on into the post-Nemesis years, like Typhon Pact era, with a lot, especially mostly like TNG, like Enterprise, E stuff. So really good, solid trilogy.
I'm glad you've been getting into that more, because I feel like for you, Star Trek is so important, and for you to have a continuation, because obviously none of these series are going to actually go in the future far enough to actually make any difference. It's nice to see you enjoying that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you're enjoying that. Something I enjoyed but didn't enjoy, begrudgingly enjoyed, and only because of what it is my number 4. You said it differently. I say coup de grace. Because I'm sophisticated.
You sound like a drunk Klingon.
You know what? You're rude. This is the 8th book in the Firefly
continuation series, even though it's not
This is
4.
This is a gift from the gods.
That we're
Okay.
gonna keep getting them.
I love the idea of these, and even though this was definitely a letdown, and every review I've seen after the fact, everybody feels the same way.
The weakest
And
one.
it is the weakest by far. If you take the series, the little box set, and you put all 8 books, you have a whole season. Finally a whole season. And that is a magical, amazing thing. I think the biggest problem with this is that it's not written from any of the crew's perspective. It's just some random Mary Jane crackhead. And I'm not enjoying that. And this is the same as the last 2, where the binding is not as high quality. You're not getting like the high quality paper. There's no pretty bookmark. It's just, everything is of lesser quality. And this one in particular, I found there were a couple different errors as far as like grammatical errors, and like at one point one of the goons, his name changes. I don't know if you noticed that. It confused the crap out of me. I was like, who's Mikey? But it was very confusing. And they even call Inara Senna instead of Sarah at one point, and it's just like no, who's doing this? This is like very half-assed, but it's still Firefly, still a good story.
Yeah.
And I love it.
My number 3, this was much higher on my list than I thought. This is like a simple tie-in, but Traces of Two Paths, a Final Fantasy VII remake novel.
You enjoyed that?
I loved this
Did you?
because this specifically adds a lot of detailed background to like 2 of the most important characters in the series in the Final Fantasy VII remake. Like, it's become like its own series within the series. But I feel like this adds so much like Tifa and Aerith background that you really, I think, should check this out. It adds so much more like to the experience of Final Fantasy VII remake, and then integrate and leading into like the next game in like a couple months. I think this adds so much background that we never got to this extent, this level of detail that it adds to those characters that I've loved since 1997. So to me, like, that was
And
really
it's
good read.
English.
Yeah, it was finally,
And
yeah. It was
most
great.
importantly, you're giving Square Enix more money.
Yeah, more Final
That's
Fantasy VII.
really
Yeah.
important, because they need it, because those poor people have no money. My number 3 is something that I thought might be young adult, but it is not. It was clearly not. This is clearly adult.
Oh, look, young adult from
No,
covers
this is not.
design.
This is not young adult. This is from Orbit Books. This is one of my favorite
I know you
publishers.
like
I
Orbit.
don't know. I love
Yeah.
Orbit. It's the Wilderwood series. It's For the Wolf and For the Throne. This is. It's supposed to be more Red Riding Hood, but I think it was much more Beauty and the Beast, especially the first book.
Okay.
And then it gets a little bit more like crazy dark in the second book. I actually prefer the first one just because it's more self-contained, and it's, I don't know, it's more fairy tale, like Grimm Brothers, darkness, and I enjoy darkness. But this one's really good too. And it's nice to read some of these that are definitely made for adults. It's just refreshing.
My number 2, the one I took with me to read while we were in Florida this year on our vacation, we have Star Trek Enterprise Rosetta. I loved this book all the way up to number 2. I'm a big fan of Hoshi. I know not a lot of people are. I've always liked Hoshi and the
Not a lot
idea.
of people are.
No, fans.
Oh.
No, not a lot of people.
Really?
A lot of people think Hoshi's hot, but Hoshi is. I really don't think there's a lot of big Hoshi fans out there. It doesn't seem to be.
If
At
you're a
least from
Hoshi
my experience.
fan,
Let me
us
know
know.
because it just doesn't seem to be that she's like a well-loved
They're
character.
just covert about it.
But I love the concept of her character and the before the Universal Translator is really completed, and I like.
She was actually a translator.
The problem is that's really hard to show on screen because it is slow, laborious work. It's not really something that's interesting and action based. It's not something on screen that you can really use a lot, and that's why she's underutilized. But in book form, you can really get into her mindset and the process of physically trying to dismantle and then engage in like restructure in an understandable form some unfamiliar language types, and you can see that in book form much better than you can on screen. And I think this was a great example of that. Something takes place during the series of Enterprise, so this was one of the best depictions of the potential, like Hoshi the character reaching potential she never quite got to reach on screen as much, so I really like that.
My number 2,
which I read, and surprised all the way to number 2.
I really like this book. So I got 2 books from TJ Klune, and then I saw this one was coming out in 2023, and so I had to get it. It's called In the Life of Puppets, and it is a Pinocchio-esque story, kind of Pinocchio meets cyberpunk Blade Runner.
Yeah. In a
post-apocalyptic future. I love the characters so much.
I do.
Nurse Ratched.
Yeah, it's funny.
She's not
funny.
even a hidden gem. She's a national treasure.
She reminds me of you.
That's why I love her so much, because she's a perfect woman. She's perfect.
She's sarcastic and swears constantly.
I love her. And Rambo is like a vacuum cleaner. He's full of energy and he's really scared. And he's great too. I love everybody. They're great. They're fantastic. All of the even side characters, really, really well done. The world is just so beautiful and real.
They were very vivid.
And that's the thing about TJ Klune. Everything seems more real than it should, and you can suspend the disbelief because of course it's real, because everything feels real. And my only problem with this book,
which is why I'm surprised it was number 2. But this is the one thing, because I know what you're gonna say.
So the very last act. The narrative was perfect. This is going to be great. This is building up. I can't wait. And then it doesn't just fall flat. Like annihilation, like utter annihilation
Terrible
happens. Not even just the last act.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different. It's like you came in and just like started writing for him. Like it was just like a different person.
But didn't you tell me that he had a different ending, and then the publisher
the
made him change it?
redemption arc. There's a note where he's thanking people, and he thanks someone, and he just casually like slips it in there that he said that his editor thought the world wasn't ready for the true ending. And so as much as that fills me with rage, it fills me with hope, and I can kind of look past that and just as a whole, this was great, and I really, really enjoyed this so much. The end.
My number 1 was this biography of Louise Brooks.
I found that for you.
Yeah, you did. Because this is just one of the most comprehensive and interesting to read. This is a problem sometimes with biographies. Sometimes they're very dry and just a bunch of dates.
Yes.
But this was well written, and it was actually enjoyable to read. And and I have one documentary about her that I think the 2 of them together are the 2 best looks into who she was as a person, not just her filmography, which I feel like is a big focus of a lot of stuff, but a lot of background of her growing up, and you really get to understand her mindset, understand the psychology of who she was as a person in her life, because she was really interesting, really out there. But I really thought this was a fantastic read.
My number 1.
This was the year of TJ Klune for you.
This was. Because remember, I got 2 books.
I know.
And I thought this was going to be the lesser of the 2. Still an interesting premise. It was like a demented Hallmark movie, is what I thought about it when I read the premise of it. Because it's this man, and he dies at the beginning, and nobody cares because he's a bad man. He's not a very nice man. And he ends up in this tea shop trying to like process his life. And the guy that owns the tea shop, he teaches him to live even though he's dead. And it just seems like this weird, like, if like the Hallmark movie went to the Twilight Zone. Like, it's like a weird premise, but it's TJ Klune. So it's like unbelievable, the character development. And I've never loved a character so much that I hated. And it's this weird juxtaposition, and it's so beautiful. And I felt all of the emotions. I sobbed like so hard. And this is one of those books where, like, at the end, like, you know those books where, like, you're just so raw at the end, and like the whole world has changed for you. Like,
yes.
It's one of those
Those
books.
experiences you
but
have to sit back
everything
and process
else,
it.
Everything else is going on like normal. And how could this be? Because I've experienced joy and trauma and like laughter and hate, and it's just it's brilliant. This is a brilliant book. You should read it, but you won't because you never listen to me.
I do. I read a couple of those books on my list. And I read the Puppet one.
This is so good. This is so good, and it's so emotional. It's about loss and life and love and laughter. Everything. It's my demented Hallmark movie. I would love to see this as a Hallmark movie, but they're not going to do that.
No.
But great. Fantastic.
You have, those are our top 10 of the year, and I'd love to hear what your top 10 books of the year
Yes.
that you read were. And you have one honorable
Or
mention
suggestions.
for some reason.
No, this is an important book that we need to talk about, okay? This is honorable because we need to talk about this.
It's gotta be the worst thing. You explain.
This is the worst book I read.
You read this just as, like...
I could not read this.
silly
I don't know how you could see it and not read it.
I can't
Sometimes I
more
have
than
to.
2 minutes to that.
This was not a long book, okay? We found this in the thrift store, and I saw it, and I was like, what? Why is his name on this? And it was called Pirate
Written
by Fabio. What?
Oh boy.
What? Fabio can write? No.
No, he can't.
The answer to that question is no. Fabio can't write. And so I was confused because why is Fabio on the cover and in the book?
Yeah, he wrote it.
He wrote it, and then I read.
He wrote a creepy story.
I'm not gonna read the premise, but suffice it to say, there is a 12-year-old girl, and he's a privateer.
Yeah.
And he doesn't love her. He's just nice, normal feelings, and then eventually he loves her, and it's extremely inappropriate. It's very badly written.
He
and
falls in love and has sexual attraction to the girl he raised.
Yes.
Like, what the?
It's
That's so creepy.
there are no words to express. It's weird, and apparently this is not the only book he wrote. I mean, it's great marketing, I guess, but
Yeah.
this is horrendous in so many ways, and I just I had to read. Like, I don't know how you can just look at this and not have to. Like, I have to read it. I have to see what happened.
I can spend an hour and a half watching a movie that's
this is
going to be horrible.
Look at the print.
Just for
It's
fun,
really big.
but
This is not
I
a
don't
long.
know. I don't. That's.
This is not a long book, but it's a book.
Yeah.
It
exists.
It's something, and I've never heard of Fabio being a writer, but apparently he was. Maybe he still is to this day.
I don't know.
But I just need to talk about that